Says we're live. Fantastic. Dawson, welcome in. Thank you for joining.
Hello.
Colleague and a friend. This is amazing. So I have a list of questions here, and obviously I got my tablet ready to roll so I can look anything up. We're not politically correct. I know this is a very sensitive world we live in, so I don't want to say the word Reds. No, don't say that. Jesus. Don't say that name either. Fuck.
You can't be doing that.
No, I know. You got to be very careful nowadays. So I'll get right into it. So just me basically asking you questions. If you want to ask questions back, feel free, fire away. So obviously I did see you're rocking your Cleveland Browns jersey. So my first question was, have they always been your team growing up, or did you kind of fluctuate between teams?
Yeah, so I started growing up, I was a Patriots fan. So grew up in that golden era where they were winning. But I wasn't really a Patriots fan. It was more I was a Gronk fan. So
There you go.
when he retired, I was kind of like, what now? So in 2017, I became a Browns fan because of Myles Garrett. So ever since then, it's just got to be the Browns. So I watch every game, and yeah, they're my guys. I follow them, all the news, all of them. So yeah.
That's fantastic. And the crazy thing is, I want to see if I can pull the stat up. I know I have it on my phone. I just don't want this to affect this video chat too much. So I want to pull up something that I read because I went on, I think it was like football NFL reference or something like that. And it has like almost anything and everything you can imagine talking about almost any team that there is. So I just want to go on my Google here real quick. And I did look up your team, and that's something that I did want to discuss. So I gotta type it in, I guess, on here. So hold on 1 second. Cleveland. I'm sure if you've been a fan since then, you remember that infamous incident with him and Mason Rudolph.
Of course.
At the end of the game.
Of course. That was something special.
Didn't he get suspended after that? Like, I'm pretty sure.
I think he got suspended for the rest of the year because it was later on in the season. I think he got it was like 4 games or something, but it ended up being the rest of the season.
Yeah. I'll never forget that because at that point the game was already out of hand. They already had the game wrapped up anyway.
Oh, yeah.
So I can't remember if Big Ben played and got hurt. I know Mason Rudolph was at the quarterback at the end. But I just can't remember if he was hurt or he got pulled or whatever the case may be. But I just remember he was.
I think it might have been that the game was just so out of hand that they took Ben out. So.
I think you froze.
Hello.
I think you froze there for a second. You started talking, then your face paused at that, and I was like, "Oh crap!" So if you don't mind repeating what you just said.
Yes, it's what we were talking about. Oh yeah, I think Ben got pulled and then Rudolph came in.
Okay.
Because I think that's what happened. Yeah.
Perfect. So I'll just read this. So it's called ProFootballReference.com. I'm sure they probably have it for all the other things like that. So a brief rundown on your team. So they played a total of 38 postseason games throughout their history. This is dating back to 1966, so a long time before I was even born. So their overall record when it comes to the playoffs is 17-21, so just below 500. That's not too bad.
Not bad.
They've had 5 wildcard games. They went 2-3, 2 divisional games. They went 7-8. 5 AFC Championship games, but unfortunately they were 0-5 in that. I'll never forget the fumble game. If you haven't had a chance to see that, that's like part of both Cleveland Browns history and Denver Broncos history, where I think they were going for the lead and then they fumbled at like the 1-yard line, and then the Broncos went down and scored and ended up winning the game. I'll never forget that. Yeah, we lost in the Super Bowl, but that's one thing I'll never forget. But since championship before 1966, they were 8-5, so I'm sure they won their fair share of championships prior to the NFL officially beginning in 1966. So they had a pretty good overall. Like I said, 17-21. That's not too bad, especially for just below 500. So the last time they made the playoffs, I'm sure you'll remember this, was back in the 2020-2021 campaign where they upset the Pittsburgh Steelers. I'm sure you were just smiling from ear to ear. That was a blowout win. I remember being at work, and I think whoever was managing at the time, they were passing me by, and they kept updating me on the scores. And I remember I was like, man, are the Steelers going to come back in this game? And they got close, but they lost 48-37. That was a wild game. And that's when it really showed like Baker's true colors, because it was just like, can he step up? Because just the 2 seasons prior, he was drafted, I think, first overall by the team.
First overall.
So he went through 2 seasons of struggles, and then 2020 through 2021, he just blew up.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just like the Browns. Like I find that like that team is similar to the ones you guys have now, because I think they were the number 5 seed as a wild card, maybe number 6, but they were like you could tell they were making the postseason. There was never a doubt like, man, if they lose the next 5 or 6 games, they're out. They're that team. They were that good, and the team you have now is just even better. And it's hard to believe. And I'll touch on them in just a second, but it's hard to believe that you don't have your $300 million quarterback playing, but you guys are still winning games. It's just goes to show a lot about the character of the team.
Well, I think the Chubb injury is more detrimental.
Yeah.
The team. You're losing.
Yeah, there's no question.
The best back in the game. Hard to pass.
And I'll never forget when you told me that. You were just so heartbroken. You're like, man, this sucks. And I'm kind of envying, because like I've been through teams that injuries can just derail your whole entire thing. And when I first saw that, I'm like, it's going to be tough to overcome. But you guys, like, it just goes to show, you lose one of your best players on the team, but yet you still overcome. It's like next man up kind of mentality. Mm-hmm. So it's very good. A lot of teams, they'll start to like deflate if they lose their number 1 guy or whatever it is. Just like, hey, we lost him. The season's over. Let's just tank and hopefully get a good pick. But like I said, I got to give you guys a lot of credit. I will touch on the playoffs here in just a quick sec. But whoever they face, like say if worst come to worst, if they do finish as the number 5 seed, I would hate to be that team from the AFC South, because I think one of those teams are probably going to be in the 4th seed unless Kansas City just implodes. But I'll touch on the playoffs in just a sec.
All right.
So getting back to that postseason runs, they made it all the way to the divisional round, where unfortunately it was a close contest, but you fell to the eventual AFC champs, the Kansas City Chiefs, 22-17. So that was a tough loss. I was honestly rooting for you guys then, because I'm a Broncos fan. Anytime any team in our division succeeds, I frown. And they've been so dominant for like 7-8 years, ever since Peyton Manning retired. They just got to get like Peyton Manning into like a younger body, and then we'll be golden again. We can actually start winning games. And then prior to that year, the last time the Browns made the postseason was back in, I think, 2002, where ironically they played the Steelers and unfortunately fell 36-33. So, and prior to that, you're like that 94, 89. So there's been a major gap in between years when it comes to this team and having playoff success. But it blows my mind that I read a stat. What is it? Their overall record, despite having such poor seasons, and now this is going back, like I said, to like the 1946. Wow. 558, 533, and 14. So you're still like 25 games above 500 overall. So it just goes to show, like, this team was obviously great back in the day. I do remember, like, in the early 2000s, mid 2010s, they were always like the bottom of the league, or bottom of the division standings, respectively. So it's crazy to think that even like almost 80 years, they still have an above 500 record. Because I remember, like, in those 2000s, when it was either Pittsburgh or Baltimore getting that division, and you always saw the Browns in that 3rd or 4th spot. So just like, it's hard to believe you can go 20 years without making the playoffs, and yet your overall record is still 20 games above 500. It's just mind blowing. Any other team in the franchise of the history would be like 100 games below 500, especially if they finished at the bottom of their division for that long. So it's just crazy to think that that's that. So I think you mentioned this before, but I just want to just double check on this. You mentioned that you were. My next question was, have you gone to see any live games? You did mention that, so feel free to tell the story.
Yeah. So always lifelong dream has been go to an NFL game, and like in my future, my dream is to hit every stadium. So a couple months back, I was just looking around, and I was like, "Where's like the closest place to me?" And it was Seattle. So I was taking a look through, and there was a game. I think it was October, like 2nd week of October. It was Browns Seahawks. I went up to my parents and I was like, "Look, I'll pay my way if we can just go to this game. I'm not going alone. That's a bad idea." So I was like, "I'll pay my way if we can go to this game." We ended up going. I had the time of my life. It was amazing just being in that atmosphere. Like, I've been to lots of CFL games, but it's just nothing like it. It's fans are standing the whole time. It's louder than anything I've ever heard. Concerts, everything. It's just a totally different thing to experience.
Now, do you think that because they were two inter-conference or different conference teams, that it wasn't as hostile compared to if you were wearing like a 49ers jersey or like a Rams jersey? Because I've seen a lot of games where you don't see it live and actually because like whenever they film the game, they're just focusing on the game, not really worried about the crowd. But anytime you look on social media, it's always like someone's got a camera up to someone. These fans are fist fighting in the stands. There's like beer getting chucked at them. So just wanted to ask from your perspective, being there live. Obviously, since the Browns aren't and Seahawks aren't like clashing and all that stuff, can't imagine wasn't that hostile. Huh?
Yeah, it's not that bad, but I mean, like, obviously, you have your die-hard fans who are up in the other people's faces, barking at them, dog pound. They're just barking, but if it was something like, especially like divisional, like with the Niners or with the Rams, I can imagine it gets pretty hectic in there.
Yeah, I would not want to go into an away team, especially NFL stadium, especially if you're wearing someone in their division because you're going to get heckled and
Oh
there
yeah.
could be some fisticuffs involved. So you said that you've gone to a few CFL games. Do you mind just explaining which ones you've seen?
Since I was like young, like as far back as I can remember, we've had tickets, like season tickets for the Edmonton team. Previously the Eskimos, now the Elks. But we had the tickets for the longest time, same seats every year. My favorite seats I've ever sat, and we were like upper deck, but the very like bottom, so like nobody in front of you. You could just see the field perfectly. We got rid of the tickets, I think 2 years ago now, because they just hiked the prices so much, and they weren't winning anything. So we were like, do we really want to keep doing this? But yeah, as far back as I can remember, it was, hey, there's a game on Friday night, we're going. And like my whole family would go, and like before it was like my mom and my sister and all of us going, it would be like my grandpa and my cousin. But then like my grandpa passed away, and then the whole family was just like we still want these tickets, but like we were the football family, and or the football side of the family was my family. So we just kept them going, and yeah.
Now you mentioned how you've gone to see a CFL and an NFL game. What's one difference you can say between the two?
Definitely the loudness. Like you go to a CFL game, and like if there's a touchdown, you hear cheering. You're in the NFL, they complete a pass and it's people stand and cheering. You got people with different memorabilia like a flag, like imagine a terrible towel. They're ripping that thing for a first down. It's just oh, man, it just totally different. It's just everyone who's there is there as a fan, not just to watch a game.
Right. No. I've got a few things on my bucket list. Like I still gotta get my passport, but once I do that, I would love nothing more than to go see an NFL live game. I mean, it's just to get that experience. And then you mentioned like how the crowd and stuff like that, they're in it the full 60 games, whereas in the CFL, they might be just sitting down until either a big play happens or like you mentioned, if they score touchdowns, like, yeah, congratulations.
Yeah.
So I think that would be pretty cool to go see an NFL game. Um, so if there was any other game or any other team you could see live, doesn't matter if it's NFL, anything like that, who would you love to see?
I'd like to see a divisional game. Like I feel like if I'm going straight Browns, I think a Browns Steelers game would be electric. They always play each other so hard, and it's just like a rivalry. But probably Niners Seahawks would be my number one. I think being that my dad's been a 49ers fan his whole life, so I've, followed along with them as well. Like they're probably my second team. If the Browns all of a sudden weren't a team, I'd be a
Yeah.
Niners fan. So probably a Niners Seahawks game because that's a rivalry that I've watched throughout the years, and it's like, oh, like back to Legion of Boom days.
Yeah. That was a stifling defense. And
Oh,
unfortunately, my Broncos got embarrassed on Super Bowl Sunday, like 48 or 43 to 8 or something like that.
yeah,
I was watching the first quarter of that game and they were getting blown out. The first play of the game was a safety.
sure
He hiked
was.
it over Manning's head. And man is like 7 feet tall. How do you do that? So after the first quarter, I had like a whole bunch of like roasts from Comedy Central. I just went through that. I didn't even pay attention. Like after that, I knew they were done. And then I got like the notification on my phone or tablet, whatever it was, like for the final score. I'm like, yeah, that's just embarrassing.
I think that's the worst gap in Super Bowl history was that game.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
And the weird thing is, I could look this up, but like prior to them winning their Super Bowls in the 90s, they went to like 4 Super Bowls before that and didn't win a single one. And I think we got like 50 points scored on us in one game. It was bad. I'll never forget like when Elway finally got those championships back, like 97, 98 or 98, 99, whatever it was, how like it felt like he had that like monkey off his shoulder kind of type of mentality, because imagine going to 3 Super Bowls, losing all of them, and then not being able to redeem yourself. Yeah, he went 2-3 in the Super Bowl, but still, I mean, Manning went 2-2. So
yeah,
you're not going to be perfect. Maybe like if you're like a Joe Montana, I don't think he ever lost a Super Bowl. And it's kind of funny. Just so I can see why he would be like in that category of like the GOAT when it comes to quarterbacks. But I remember I was discussing this with somebody that just like in basketball, kind of ironic, I have a Michael Jordan poster behind me as I'm talking and making this reference, how like people always compare him to like the GOAT, but he was great for his time. But like, how can you really compare 2 guys when they never even played against each other? So say someone might make an argument that LeBron James is good or is the best ever because of all of his accomplishments, but you can't really compare James and Jordan because they never played against each other. So and it's the same thing with hockey. I know you're not that big into hockey, but I know I am. Like people always talk about how Gretzky's the greatest of all time. Well, he was great for his time, but how would he do in this NHL or how would he from now do in that era? Like it's 2 different eras of thing. Yeah, you can say he's the greatest because he has the most points. That's fantastic, and he might honestly never get caught, or no one will ever beat that record. But again, for his time, he was fantastic. But like if you go up against like Maurice Richard and the guys in the 50s and 60s, how can you really compare them if they've never actually played against each other? So I always find it troubling when it comes to like people saying, "Oh, this is the greatest of all time of any sport." It's like, yeah, he was great for his time, but he didn't play against this guy. He didn't play against that team. So I don't know.
Greatest of an era is how I'd like to put it.
That's good. I like that.
Yeah. Well,
but you can't really go in.
Yeah. Well, and what I think is like for like GOAT, when I think is like Jerry Rice. Back when he was playing, there was basically no rules. Like you could hit a receiver before he even caught the ball, but he still put up these crazy numbers, which makes me think now that if he played in this age, how many points and yards is he putting up?
It's crazy to think. Yeah. But now I don't want to say the league's soft, but they're softer compared to those times I just mentioned, because if I'm guarding you and I so much as just like tap you on the head, that's pass interference because I'm blocking your view. So it's crazy to think that you said like the guys would give him like fisticuffs just trying to catch a damn ball, or like have literally got one holding his arm to hold him back. And like they never called that kind of stuff back in like the 70s, 80s, 90s, whatever it was. So again, it's not soft because it's still probably I would, of all the sports that are to play, as tough as hockey would be, because obviously you're on skates, football, it's like your goal is to hit somebody. And unless you do a high hit or you like whatever it is, I'm getting paid to hit someone. Well, how many sports can say that? You can't hit anybody in basketball. You can't hit anybody. I mean, you can't hit people in hockey, but there's red and green flags. If that makes any sense when it comes to that stuff. But for football, like in hockey, you're not paid to hit somebody. You're paid to score.
Yeah.
Whereas on defense, so basically half of your team is getting paid to hit the other team. So I just think it'd be crazy. That'd be one sport, again, aside from hockey, because you have to be on skates and I suck at skating, but that would be one sport that I think would be extremely tough because you got to be fit because like guys are super fast and you got to be able to take a hit. So you did describe this, but there's actually a 2-part kind of thing right here. So I do recall, I think I mentioned this to you one night about how I saw like your clip when they had that fight between McDavid and Pietrangelo when you guys went to the Stanley Cup final game. I got to say this, anytime I ever get those seats, I'm always trying to see if I can like find myself
Oh yeah.
Whenever I'm watching highlights, I'm like, did I sit there? Did I sit there? Anytime I've ever gone to a game, I'm like, what game was that? And like, because you're in the front row, the camera, especially if it's in that section. So if you wouldn't mind just talking me through that experience, I'm sure you may have been to a regular season game, but a playoff game, and I know I went to one, I think the year before. Just describe the atmosphere when it comes to a playoff game for the hockey, at least.
Yeah, so I'd never been to Rogers. That was my first time in there. I'd been to a couple Oilers games back when they were in Rexall, but
Yeah.
I hadn't been to a game in I think like 6 or 7 years. So when the manager came up to me and was like, "Hey, like we've got tickets. Do you want to go to the playoff game?" And I was like, "Yeah, I do." So ended up going and sitting in that front row. I mean, wow, you're right there. Everything's happening in front of you. It's looking around. There's people behind you cheering, but there's nobody in front of you. It's you in the game, and I've never experienced any sort of sporting event like that where it's basically the TV is right in front of you. You can see everything. You can hear them talking to each other. It's, I've never had anything like that.
Yeah, no, it's something special. I remember the first time I got those tickets. I remember the manager told me, "I was like, these are pretty good seats." And then I got there, and like you said, it's literally you, the glass, and the board, and that's the only thing that's separating you from the ice.
Yeah.
And I know whenever I've gone to games prior to that, you're up in the bleachers. You got like could be cramped, whatever the case may be. Is but man, it's like luxurious. You can spread your feet out. You
Oh yeah.
can just enjoy life. And I'll never forget that when I went. This was in the 2000. This was the playoffs from not last year, but the year before. And they unfortunately they lost the game. But the people that were beside me, there's a couple beside us, and they were talking about how much they spent on the tickets for a playoff game. And I was just blown out of my mind. I'm like, holy cow. And the guy looks at me, he's like, how much did your tickets cost? And I looked at him, I said, oh, these are my boss's season tickets.
Free.
Yeah, exactly. I just had to pay for the drive here. That was about it.
Exactly.
But I'll never forget that. Like I think it was in the thousands. I know it was in the thousands because like you're right up front, so you're like paying them like obviously the more money you're paying up front compared to and then like the nosebleed section. So, but yeah, I know like it'd be different if they won. I'm sure they'd still be upset they've spent that money. But if the team won, like it was kind of worth it. But if your team loses and you're spending thousands of dollars, not to mention what you're spending on like merchandise and food inside the building too, like it's not cheap.
No, no.
So since you said that you've seen both hockey and football, aside from I know that there are some NFL stadiums that they are in an actual building, but for the most part, everything's played outside.
Yep.
So you're gonna have like natural daylight, the weather, and all that other stuff. So aside from being outside, what's the difference between seeing a National Football League game and a National Hockey League?
I think. I mean, obviously, the noise in an NFL stadium, I think, is louder. But I think just like the atmosphere at a hockey game with all the fans is more interactive than an NFL game is. So if there's like a goal, there's everyone is high fiving each other 4 or 5 rows back. It's especially like at an Oilers game, you've got everybody there basically is an Oilers fan. So you've got everyone together and all celebrating together. Whereas an NFL game, you've got people travel. It's a lot of traveling fans in the NFL. I don't know how big it is in the NHL, but for certain, like I went to that Seattle game, there was a lot of Browns fans. I even seen like I seen a couple Raiders fans even like just made the drive up, I guess. But I think it's just a lot of the fans are more together at an NHL game.
That makes a lot of sense. Um, so before I get into the three questions I had just for you, I just wanted to just quickly discuss what is it? Let's see if I can pull it up on the tablet here. Come on. It's 2023. This technology should be like bam, bam, bam. So what I want to do is get your opinion on something, and then we'll just kind of go through this little thing on the NFL as soon as it loads. Come on.
While you're waiting, I do have a question for you.
Sure, go nuts.
What do you think about the benching of Russell
I,
Wilson?
I got to say, I'm not surprised. I got to say, I'm more of a fan of Sean Payton than I am of Russell Wilson. I just felt that if we had the Russ from 4 or 5 years ago, I'd say we're cooking, we're good. But the guy is in his mid 30s. He's not agile. He's more comfortable staying in the pocket. But when you're the shortest guy on the field, man, it makes it tough. Like there's no wonder he can't find anyone open. He can't see. And then when he does scramble, you can see it in his legs. He's not the same Russ that he was back when they won the championship and won like back-to-back Super Bowls. So I'm not surprised with the benching, and I'm not very surprised that they're going to cut him at the end of the season. I'm just curious about how much is going to go against their cap, because I remember there was talk last season when they were horrendous about can they afford to cut Russ, and it was just pretty much like you're almost breaking even whether you keep him or you lose him. You're probably paying just as much, or if not more. So it's crazy to think that we paid. Like I wasn't shocked about the trade. Like something had to happen because we've sucked for almost 10 years now, and it's going to be 10 years as of now, or maybe next year that we missed the postseason. But I would have rather have seen him play a game before he signed that contract, because he was still under contract for I think last year or maybe this year too before he did the extension. So I was very surprised when he put pen to paper before he even took his first preseason snap. I was mind blown. I think they just seen him in practice and they were just looking at his what he did with Seattle and thought, well, we might get this guy and this will be fantastic. But you didn't. Like, he would have been better off staying in Seattle. No disrespect to Geno, but I mean, I feel like he probably could have done just as good of a job as Geno did with Seattle the last 2 years. But I mean, what we need is a new young quarterback. We tried with Drew Lock and failed. We've tried it with so many quarterbacks since Manning retired. We gave Trevor Siemian. Do you even remember where the hell he is nowadays? I don't know.
He's playing for the Jets. He's starting tonight.
Is he?
Sure is.
Wow. Okay. So his career is still going. You add more to Wikipedia after this year. We tried Paxton Lynch. We failed. I think he's in the XFL. We tried bringing Brock back, but that was done because he wanted out of Denver because he wasn't getting the starting job. But I mean, if Peyton Manning's your starting quarterback, he's going to play. So we tried bringing Brock back. That didn't work. And then we tried going to Joe Flacco, and now he's a member of your Browns.
Sure is.
And I'll never forget, I know I mentioned this before, but when Denver signed him, Elway was standing behind Flacco as he was like signing his contract. And then someone asked Elway a question. He's like, we still got Flacco in the prime of his life. Well, now he looks like he's in the prime of his life because he could be comeback player of the year. Where the hell was this Joe Flacco when we wanted to sign him 4 years ago? After that, who did we go through? I know we tried drafting Drew Lock. Now he's in Seattle, sometimes playing. Otherwise, he's still a backup quarterback. And then we tried Teddy Bridgewater. He didn't do that bad. We had a pretty okay season, but then he only signed the 1 year, and then he left it for like Miami or something like that. Then we tried Russ the last 2 years, and nothing has worked. What we need, like our division, we have young quarterbacks. Patrick Mahomes, not even 30 years old. O'Connell, I think for the Raiders, he's like in his early 20s, like whatever it is. And for the Raiders, I don't know who their quarterback is because when they signed Jimmy G, it looked like he had the starting job, and now he's not even playing.
Well, the Raiders is O'Connell, and he's a rookie this year.
Okay. So again, a young quarterback. There we go. Herbert, he's had an off season, and now he's done for the year. He's still a young quarterback. We need a young quarterback. We can't bring someone 30-plus years old into the system and think this is going to work. No, we need someone that's agile because I don't know if anyone's noticed. Look at a lot of quarterbacks. What do? They step out of the pocket. If they feel rush coming on, they try to avoid a sack. They try to make a positive play, not a negative play. Russ can't cook. He can't run. He can barely walk. And yet we're paying this man $300 million, but now we're cutting him. So I don't know where he's going to play next year. I don't know if he even has an NFL. Like, what team is going to look at that guy and be like, yeah, let's bring him on. He'll be our starting quarterback. Everybody in the league has a starting quarterback. Like, Will Levis is a starting quarterback for Tennessee. Like, he can't go there.
I think I was talking about this with my buddy last night. I think the only team I could see him going to is the Falcons.
Maybe.
I can see it. They don't have a bona fide starter. Ritter hasn't shown any flashes. Heineke, not the guy. So you either draft someone or you bring in because they don't have a high enough pick to get one of those top guys. So unless you trade
Yeah.
down, but I think maybe they bring in Russ for a year, maybe see how he plays, and then try to get somebody in the draft.
If I'm any team out there, I'm only signing him to a 1-year deal. I'm not
Yeah.
giving him 2, 3, 4, 5 years because that's going to bite me against the cap going forward. And that's exactly what's happened with Denver. Like, I know we're going to have to bite some kind of money this offseason by cutting them, because when you sign a guy to that money, he's owed that money.
Yeah, 100%.
So I don't know. I still think we can possibly finish maybe 8-9. I mean, if we beat the Chargers, I don't know if we're beating the Raiders. The Raiders are really, really good. I mean, they just beat the Chiefs. So I could see the Raiders finishing 9-8. We could finish 9-8, but because they beat us earlier, I think they'll still finish second in the division, because they're second right now at 7-8. So it's been a lot of hype behind my team over the last 2 years, and it has not shown. I know we have new ownership, maybe that's higher expectations, but what I was trying to say at the start of this was, I believe more in Sean Payton than I do Russell Wilson. I believe Payton has a vision. I don't think Russell was part of that vision. He was just, because he was already part of the team. Payton was kind of handcuffed, saying, okay, well, this is my guy. I got to kind of work with. You see what he did this year. The first 8 games we sucked, and we went on like a 5-game winning streak, and then we were back in contention. But now we've lost our last 2 to the 3. We lost to the Patriots. Who the loses to the Patriots when they don't have a quarterback?
Yeah.
I know you got Bill Belichick, and I'll say this about Belichick. He'll be the greatest defensive coach of all time. I know I don't like comparing players, but coaches, that's different, because you have different guys in your team. And the fact that he's been able to have as much success as he's had, I've always said this about how he needed Brady more than Brady needed him. But I mean, if they didn't have the defense, how would they still be would they have still been as good as they were? So anytime I go up against Belichick, and if I was a betting man, I'd almost always bet against his defense. But it doesn't matter who has his quarterback. I mean, they can they beat the Steelers. No one saw that coming.
Nope.
So, I mean, they're winning games they probably should have been wanting to win back in October, but now it's a little too late for the Pats. But when it comes to Belichick, I wasn't surprised about the loss. Like, I thought that we could have won, but if we don't win against the Chargers, we're finishing 7-10. Let's put it that way. There's no way. We got to beat the Chargers if we want to try and win. Now we're in a position we're like in the middle of the pack, so we're not really going to draft that high. So it's like, do we win out our last 2 games, lose our last 2 games? Either way, we're going to be 20th, 19th in the league. So unless another team wants to trade down, I don't know I don't know if we have any picks, because I think we gave them all to Seattle, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
Okay, that was my rant. So this is what I finally was able to load up. Actually loaded up as I was talking. I wanted to get this out of the way. So I just want to take a quick little look at the standings and get your opinion on the teams and where they're at, I guess, more or less, and going forward. So we'll start in the AFC East, where the Dolphins are 11-4, looking pretty dominant, in my opinion. You have the Bills 9-6. The Jets, I believe, have been eliminated from the postseason at 6-9, because I don't think an 8-9 team is going to be good enough, even though that AFC wildcard has 8-win teams. But I don't see the Jets winning out the rest of the season, making the postseason. Patriots, which I just mentioned, 4-11. So obviously the Patriots and the Jets most likely not making the postseason. For the Dolphins and the Bills, I guess 11-4 and 9-6 respectively. So the Dolphins should win out that division, but the only way they could lose, obviously, if they lost the last 2 games. How do you feel about the Dolphins going into the playoffs?
I think healthy, the Dolphins are the most dangerous team in the league. I think having the speed that they do with Waddle and Hill on the outside, and then having both Mostert and A-Chain, if they're healthy, you've got 2 of the fastest backs in the game. There's a lot of speed on that team for any defense. It doesn't matter who your defense is. That's a lot of speed to deal with. And healthy, they can put up 45 points a game like that, right? And I mean, their defense is good enough, but if they put up that kind of points, it's hard to keep up with.
Now, for the Bills, pending a late season collapse, to me, for the most of this year, they've been kind of inconsistent. They win one, they lose one, win one, lose one. So it's just been like, when is the real Bills going to finally show up? Now they've finally gone on like a 2 or 3 game winning streak. They're looking at the Bills that we expected to see of them this season. So if they finish in a wild card position, that could be 6th, maybe 7th. I'm not too sure where they're at right now. But would you be threatened by this Bills team if you're the host team in the playoffs?
I think you have to be. I mean, what you don't want to face a hot team going into the playoffs, right? You don't want to
Yeah,
face a team who's won 6 in a row or whatever. If they went out, I think it's 5 in a row that they would have won.
something,
And
man.
yeah, I think like leading up to this point, they didn't have an identity. They didn't know what they were. But now they've got the pieces working together. Allen's playing good. They have a rushing attack, which nobody's seen coming. And I think that was the missing piece, was finding that running game, was having James Cook finally show, hey, I can do this. And having that side of it to match Josh Allen, not everything's on his shoulders anymore, which I think is the biggest thing for that team.
Yeah, no question. I'd be a little threatened if I was a team and they were coming into my building because even though I'm sure as home fans and especially if you have an outdoor atmosphere, that team and the fans should get you hyped up. But I mean, we've seen a lot of away teams win in the postseason, so there's no guarantees. Yeah, it's great you have the fourth, third, second seed locked in, but if you don't make it out of that wild card round, it's going
Mm-hmm.
to be a lot of upset fans. So moving over to the division that you are very familiar with, the AFC North, we have the Ravens coming into this matchup into this week at 12-3. Your Browns coming in at 10-5. The Steelers and Bengals are both 8-7 respectively. Do you see a scenario where all four of these teams make the playoffs? And B, do you think there's a possibility you can play catch up and steal that division away from Baltimore?
It all depends on this week, right? Especially with what I think is the biggest game of the week with that Ravens Dolphins game. I mean, if the Ravens lose that game, I'm not sure who they play in Week 18, but I know that the Browns play the Steelers next week, or might be the Bengals, but they play one of those two. And I see them winning this week, and then also I think they'll win next week. So I think the Browns get to 12 wins, but if Baltimore wins this week, I mean, obviously it's over, but I think the Browns could steal it. Um, all four teams making the playoffs, I don't trust either the Bengals or the Steelers having backups. I mean, even if they make the playoffs, I don't see them winning a game, but that's just strictly on that backup quarterback train.
And it's crazy to think that at the start of the season, I think I had the Bengals pegged as one of the favorites to go all the way because they had Joe Burrow. But when they lost him early in the season, it seemed like their season was just completely gone. But they do find themselves hovering around that seventh wildcard spot along with the Steelers. Obviously, I believe the fifth team is the Browns. The sixth team is the Bills. So there's a lot of 8-7 teams out there that could possibly clinch or miss the playoffs. So I just want to touch quickly on the AFC West, and then I want to get talking about the AFC South because that division is crowded with a lot of teams with the exact same record. So the Chiefs are coming into this week at 9-6. As I mentioned, the Raiders and Broncos both have 7 and 8 wins. The Chargers are more likely a lost cause to making the postseason. For the Chiefs, it just seems that last year they did so well without Tyreek Hill, and now they only have Travis Kelce. The receivers are dropping passes like there's no tomorrow. How much faith do you have in this Chiefs team to really be a contender in the playoffs?
Yeah, unless somebody steps up, I could see them losing in the wild card because they're not getting the 1 seed. Everybody knows that, but I can see them losing in the wild card because last year you still had guys making plays outside of Kelsey, right? But this year, if you double team Kelsey, like you throw a safety on him and a middle linebacker or something, who else are you throwing to? Like nobody's. I mean, if they get open, they're dropping the ball or they're not getting open at all. So I just don't know where they're supposed to look to move the ball downfield.
Yeah, we don't want to talk about Kadarius Toney, right?
No, no, no.
I always thought the Giants were crazy to give up on him that quick, and because I think he was like an early or a high pick when they got him, but he failed there, and it's looking like he ain't doing that much better. And it's like you should be doing even better when you have probably one of the better quarterbacks in this game. So I know when they played the Bills a couple of weeks ago that he ended up costing them the game because of that offside, and there was so many people debating that. But when you watch it, you can see you can't see the football from the center. And if you can't see the football from the center, you're clearly offside. And I remember like hearing about how players or the ref should let the players know. The players should just know where to stand. It's like you can see where the ball is, if worse come to worse, look for a line judge and say, hey, can you see the ball? Hey, do I look offside? I'm sure they will tell you if there's say if there's 10 seconds left on the clock before you hike it. I'm sure they can look over and say, hey, can you see the ball? If the ref says yes, then he ain't going to throw a flag for you being offside. So maybe he wasn't paying attention. Maybe he wasn't even looking at the ball. I'd have to watch the replay again. But I just find it so crazy how people are so quick to defend him when the majority of people are like, he has no reason to be defended.
Yeah, and you can. Pre-snap, you'll always see a receiver, like any game you watch, you'll see the receiver look to the sideline, give a thumbs up, and the ref will give one back, signaling that he's onside. Tony didn't do it. He didn't look at the ref. He lined up where he wanted to and went with it. So I think it is fully on him. He didn't check with anyone. I mean, there's no discussion there if you ask me.
No. And the crazy thing is, he ended up being if he didn't line up offside, that would have been one of the greatest plays ever because Kelsey caught the ball. Then he threw a lateral over him. He caught it and went for the touchdown. So he scored the game with a touchdown, but he lined up offside. So I don't think there's a hole deep enough for him to dig under at that point.
Yeah.
So I don't have very high hopes for the Raiders or Broncos making the postseason because, like I just mentioned, where both the Bengals and the Steelers are 8-7. They obviously have a game in hand on them. Now, to get over to a very crowded division, I'm very intrigued to hear your thoughts on this in the AFC South. All through the top 3 teams in that division, all sitting at 8-7. The Jaguars are still on top. They're narrowly hanging on for dear life for that AFC South crown. But then you got the Colts, and they don't have Richardson. They got Gardner Minshew. Then you have the Texans and C.J. Stroud. Out of those 3 teams, who do you think gets the title for the AFC South title crown, and which team do you think can actually be dangerous in the playoffs?
I think that the Jags will win it, but I think that the bigger threat is the Texans. The Jags have been I don't even know what happened. It's all of a sudden these past 3 or 4 weeks, it's just blown up on them. So I think they do pull it together and make the playoffs, but I think they'll win that division. But if I was a playoff team, the Texans are one of the last teams I'd want to play. It'd probably go Bills and then the Texans because when the Texans are hot and Stroud's playing well, they're a scary team.
Do you think there's any doubt in your mind he does not get Rookie of the Year?
If he doesn't get it, something's wrong. He was an MVP favorite as of 5 weeks ago.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
It's wild. No, I remember last year around this time, it looked like the Titans were going to run away with that division, and they lost 6 in a row. They lost the last game to the Jaguars. The Jaguars came back and got it. So if the Jags do want to stay afloat on top of that division, they got to start winning some games because, I don't know who would win the tiebreaker. Maybe they've lost 2 games to the Colts already. Maybe they've already lost the Texans. I don't know. So you could finish with the same record as a team, but if they've beaten you more often than you've beaten them, they're going to steal it away. So you don't want, if you're the Jaguars, you don't want this to come down to a Week 18 matchup and pray for another team to victory. So they got to win their this upcoming game. So a very crucial game for all those teams. And okay, so I'll ask this one question before I flip it to the NFC, and then we'll see where we're at time for there. But so with the Colts, Texans 8-7, and the Steelers and the Bengals at 8-7. Let's just pretend that the Bills and your Browns are already locked in. So they're the 4th, 5th, and 6th spot are already taken up. Out of those 4 teams, the Colts, Texans, Steelers, and the Bengals, which one do you really believe will make that 7th seed?
I think it is the Texans. I believe Stroud's coming back. Let me see if I can pull it up. But I think Stroud's back this week from his concussion. Man, it's not working. I think he's coming back from his concussion this week, and I think that if he gets back to how he was playing, I think that the Texans will definitely lock it up because, 3 of those 4 teams have backups playing, right?
Yep.
Minshew, I really like Minshew, but I just don't think he has he doesn't have that it factor to get them into the playoffs or through the playoffs. But I think Stroud kind of has that chip on his shoulder where he wants to show people I should have gone number 1, right?
Yeah.
So I think that the Texans will make the 7th seed, and I think that they could make some noise if they're healthy.
And it's crazy to think that they get the 7th seed. If the standings stay where they're at, they would end up playing the Dolphins. And I think that'd be a pretty scary matchup if anyone goes to play against the Dolphins. And one thing I just wanted to touch on the Dolphins was before their victory over the Cowboys, it looked like a lot of the wins they came were against below 500 teams.
Yep.
Now that they've beaten the Cowboys, do you still have enough belief in this team that they can still be dangerous, or do you still think they still have to prove something in the last 2 weeks?
I think that they did prove themselves with beating the Cowboys, because I think the Cowboys are probably in, like, overall in the league, I think they're probably the third team that I'd take to make a run for the Super Bowl would be the Cowboys. And so I think showing that they can compete with a team like that, I think that they definitely have proven to themselves more than they've proved to fans that
Yep.
they can do this. They can beat a good team. And I think knowing that they're not going to go into a game like, we haven't been able to do this, because it's definitely in their heads like, we haven't beaten a team that's better than us. Now
Yeah.
they go out and do it. So I think they've proven to themselves that they can do it.
Perfect. So now I'll just flip things over to the NFC real quick. And I would just kind of ironic that we just talked about the Cowboys, but we'll look at that NFC. I apologize, East Division. I'm pretty sure we can both guarantee that the Giants and Commanders are out of contention, 5-10, 4-11 respectively. So between the Eagles and the Cowboys, the Eagles do have a 1-game advantage. They're 1 game ahead of the Cowboys. Do you see a scenario where the Cowboys take over that division?
I think 100%. Just real quick, I just seen Stroud did get cleared from his concussion. So yeah.
Fantastic. He will be playing.
So
Okay.
back to the Cowboys, I think the Eagles are not what they were. I don't know. I think it is Jalen Hurts. I think that he's just not playing how he wants to or how he should be. I think that he's just not playing up to that level that he was last year or earlier on in the season. And I think that the Cowboys are going to get hot right at the right time. Dak's going to show that he can be that guy, win a playoff game, and see how far they can make it in the playoffs. But I think that the Cowboys overall are the better team than the Eagles.
It's crazy to think that the year they give up Ezekiel Elliott, they look even more better without him.
And that hurts me. That I love Zeke. I love him.
But I think one thing I can both agree on, because that NFC is so weak when it comes to the wild card, that we can almost guarantee that both the Eagles and the Cowboys are making the playoffs because of the 11 respectively. So there's no debate about that. So just over to the NFC North real quick. The Bears are coming on 6-9. I don't think they've been mathematically eliminated, but I don't see a scenario where they win 2 games and sneak in, because the Packers and Vikings have 7-8 record. So one of those teams could possibly sneak into a 7th seed. But the Detroit Lions, who would have guessed? I'll make this one crazy comparison, and you might be like, Ian, you're totally out of line. But the Lions were basically the Browns forever. Like, they just couldn't find a consistent guy to get this team over the board. And finally, they made a trade after having Matthew Stafford, probably one of the best quarterbacks the team's ever had in their history. They trade him away. He wins the Super Bowl, obviously, with the Rams. Jared Goff comes back in return. He went to a Super Bowl with the Rams, but unfortunately, he fell short to the Patriots 13-3 back in 2019. So they finally win their first NFC North division. I think the last time they won a division, I think it was the NFC Central, if I'm not mistaken. That was 30 years ago. 30 years. And they finally got a home playoff game. So I'm sure if you're a Lions fan, it's like, finally, I was like a baby, and now I'm fully grown. And now this team is finally fully grown. So how much faith do you have in Jared Goff and that Lions team in the playoffs?
Coming out of the NFC, I think obviously your top team's the Niners. Then I think it goes Cowboys, and then I think it goes Lions. They are dangerous. I love Jared Goff. I think that he definitely has that underdog, like a Baker type thing, where he gets drafted to his team super high. I think he went number 2. He might have gone number 1. I don't know who went 1 and 2 between Wentz and him, but plays well, gets basically ruled off by his team, gets traded, and starts playing really well. And I think that I really like Goff. I think that he can do something special for the Lions.
Oh, it's fantastic. They're a dangerous team, and Dan Campbell, there's something about that coach. man, like I feel like I would get jacked up just hearing him just yelling at you guys, firing you up. Like I'd be like so motivated just to go. I'd go to war for that guy. Like
Yeah.
he seems like a really, really good coach. So yeah, the Lions already clinched the NFC North. The NFC East is still up for debate. Now I'll touch on the NFC West, then I'll touch on the NFC South, which is I'll get into that in just a second. So obviously the 49ers, they've already clinched their division with an 11-4 record. Like you said, the best team in the NFC right now. Below them, you have the Rams at 8-7, the Seahawks at 8-7. I believe those teams are 5th and 6th respectively in the standings.
Yep.
So I'd be very shocked if both those teams did not make the playoffs. I'd be very shocked if like the other teams overruled them, because the Rams and Seahawks would have to lose 2 games in a row in order for the other teams to take over them. So I think they should be a lock in to at least get a wild card position. The Cardinals, man, like I remember after like the 2021 season when they played the Rams in the first round of the playoffs, up until that, they were looking like one of the best teams out there. Then they kind of derailed at the end of that season. They lost the Rams in the wild card spot. They missed the playoffs last year. Kyler Murray got hurt. He didn't start the season. Now he is starting, but the team's 3-12. Where do you go forward? Like I don't even know if they've signed Murray long term. But would you take a risk at signing that guy for a long term, especially when his inconsistency and his injuries are playing a factor?
Well, I think he might be on a contract. I think he did get signed, but I might be wrong there. But I think that they keep Murray long term. I think that he is their guy for the foreseeable future, but they have to build around him. They have no weapons right now. Their top receiver is Marquise Brown, I believe, right now, which, yeah, he's a deep threat, but he's not going to give you that 8 receptions a game for 100 yards and a touchdown. You need one of those guys like a CeeDee Lamb, someone who you can rely on on a 3rd and 12, you can rely on to get you that first down when it matters most.
Yeah.
So I think they don't just have the pieces around him to succeed. Their defense is atrocious. It's a couple-year rebuild, but I think that Murray is the answer for them at quarterback.
Now, say if it does take him a few years, do you think he sticks with the process and trusts it out and says, okay, well, I'll stick with you guys for 5-6 years. I'll sign 5. Like, say if there's a scenario where he's not signed, obviously I can quickly Google this or whatever it is, but say if there's a scenario where he's not signed and he's like, okay, this team is clearly on the rebuild. Like you said, there's a lot of pieces that they still got to do, whether it's via trade, drafting, whatever the case may be, is free agent signing. But let's just look at this time next year. I don't think there'll be a postseason team next year because of the Rams and Seahawks. I still think they're going to be pretty good. And I'm sure the other teams in the NFC will get better next year as well. So if you're looking at this team like, okay, we're not making the playoffs this year, the year after is questionable. Like, how long do you, like, if you're Kyler Murray right now, how long of a term do you really want to sign? Because if you're not guaranteed to get in the playoffs the next 5 years, do you really want to sign a 6 or 7 year deal just to make the playoffs at the latter end of that contract?
Well, I think that the perfect deal for him is a 3-year. I think going into next year with a super high pick that they have this year, hopefully they get a receiver or a big piece on defense in the draft. So I think next year, obviously, they're not going to be a threat. But I think going into that second year, if they sign him this year for 3 years, going into that second year, I think if they start putting it together, he might say, hey, like, I see where this is going. Maybe let's look into an extension. But halfway through the season on that second year, I think if they're just not putting it together, I think he might ask out of that.
Yeah, it's going to be, it's tough. Like I said, this team looked like they were legit just a couple seasons ago. They could have been a threat, but they've just kind of, their train is just falling off the tracks at like the worst possible time. Murray's in like the prime of his, or might be just before his prime of his career. Like, this guy still has got a lot of potential.
Yeah.
I would just hate to see it wasted on a team rebuilding, because like I said, if they make the playoffs the next 2 to 3 years, that's 2-3 years of him aging. He's not going to be the same guy 4 or 5 years from now that he is right now, as we've seen with a lot of quarterbacks. They might be great at one point in their career. I mean, they might be great for 5-10 years. But after that, you're going to see them kind of falling apart. Like, look at a lot of older players that are in their mid to late 30s. I mean, Flacco is an exception. Yeah. But any other guy that's up there in that age group, if they're not retired, they are going to retire because they just don't have the legs that they used to have at one point. So obviously the Cardinals not making the postseason. Now we're getting off to the weakest division in football. Yes, I said that. Even though the AFC South, they all have 8-7 records, the NFC South is just what the hell. Coming into this season, I didn't like if there was a possibility to check off no one gets the division crown, I would have checked that off. I'm sure thousands of other people would have checked that off because once Brady left Tampa, how much faith did you honestly feel? Like, obviously, you had Baker as your quarterback. Now seeing him start and playing for the Buccaneers at the start of the season, they looked good. I think they're like 3-1. It was like, man, they're legit, but roller coaster, man, roller coaster. 7-7, 6-7, 5-6. Now they're 8-7. But they are technically the top seed in that division. But again, with tiebreakers, if Atlanta beats them or the Saints beat them, they could take over that division as well. So I guess, first of all, your thoughts on Baker and seeing him in a Buccaneers uniform and his thoughts for this season so far.
With Baker, I'll never forgive the Browns for getting rid of him. I won't. He turned the franchise around, if you ask me. He took them from nothing to making the playoffs in 2 or 3 years and winning a playoff game. And then they wrote him off and said, we don't want you anymore. So I'm happy to seeing him succeed with the Bucs because the past 3 weeks, I think, he has played better than most quarterbacks who I've seen play this year in the past 3 weeks. So I think if he keeps playing how he's playing, they could win a playoff game. They're not going to make a run, but I could see them sneaking a win out, especially with the weapons they have and having that defense that is really good against the run with Vita Vea in the middle. Their linebackers are great. Corners are suspect, but I think that they could sneak out a game in the wild card. But I'm happy to see Baker playing well right now.
No, he's playing good. There's no question about it. But what I find so strange is because that NFC is so weak, even if you are the Falcons and the Saints, you're sitting there at 7-8. It's like, well, there's still two different outcomes. We could either steal this division or still make the playoffs because one of these 4 teams that are 7-8 have the 7th seed. So if it's not the Packers, it has to be the Vikings. If it's not the Vikings, it has to be the Falcons or the Saints because they all have 7 wins. So it's crazy to think that 4 teams that are below 500, one of those 4 are guaranteed to get into the playoffs. So not all is really lost. So if you are a Falcons and Saints fan, yeah, you want to win these next 2 games to have a good record. But you could still lose out and still make the playoffs. So it's just it's crazy.
Yeah,
I never would have guessed a scenario where these teams would be this inconsistent and still in a playoff spot.
Well, I mean, touching on the Saints, Derek Carr is just, I mean, kick him out the league. This guy has just been pitiful. The one game, it was like 3 weeks ago, going into the, like halfway through the third quarter, he had 37 passing yards. What are we doing? Why is he the starter? I've never seen a starting quarterback have that little passing yards going into the fourth quarter. Yeah. He ended up finishing with whatever 100 and some, but I thought he might blossom that team into something good with the weapons that they had, but he's just been horrendous, and I don't see the Saints going anywhere in the near future.
And it's so crazy because it was either last offseason or the offseason before that where the Raiders re-signed him. Mm-hmm. So they just re-signed him, and then they're like, "Okay, you know what? We've seen enough of you. Kick you to the curb." So I was shocked about the release. I remember before he got released, there was a potential trade involving the Saints, but that didn't end up going through. Carr just wanted to wait until he was able to be a technical free agent.
Yep.
And then he ended up signing with the Saints. So I'm sure if you're the Raiders, you're probably bitter because you got nothing back from him. But if at the same time, if you've seen him play just as bad or worse on another team, are you really missing? I'm sure obviously they would have loved to have gotten like a pick or something before getting rid of him. But I mean, I think the Raiders are better off without him. And that's crazy to think because they were kind of garbage before he got there. He was okay, but he never got them over the hump. I think the only time he made the playoffs was back when they played the Bengals in the wild card, and then they obviously lost that matchup. But yeah, I was shocked about the release and shocked about how he's been with the Saints. Like I thought that he would have elevated his game, elevated the Saints. Like if I had to have picked a division winner at the start of the season, it probably would have been the Saints because again, just like you said before with the Falcons, and we'll touch on them in a sec. I don't know how much faith in the quarterback they have, and I knew that losing Brady would hurt the Bucks, but I didn't think they would be in the position that they're in with Baker. So I mean, there's a lot of I don't knows out there in this world. But yeah, like the Saints, not that good, but they can still squeak in. Falcons, not that good, they can sneak in. So I will ask you this: so I think you and I agree that the Rams and Seahawks are pretty much locked in, unless they lose their last 2 games respectively. They should be the 5th and 6th seed. Sorry, the 6th. No, the 5th. No, wait, hold on a second. I'm screwing this all up. Sorry, Cowboys right now they'd have the 5th seed. The Rams and Seahawks they have the 6th and 7th. Sorry, so if the playoffs started right now, all the 18 wins would get in. If there's a scenario where you get to pick against the Rams or Seahawks, who do you see them possibly like? If one of those 2 teams does not make it in, who do you see between the Falcons, Saints, Packers, and Vikings taking over?
I think the Packers. I think when Jordan Love plays good, you look at the throwing mechanics and he looks like Rodgers. I mean, being under him for whatever it was that 4 years, I think he learned a lot from Rodgers, and I think if he puts it all together, he can lead a winning team, but he just has to put it together. I think that the Falcons are a pitiful team. I think that the Saints are maybe even worse, and I think the Vikings, with just no quarterback play, I think it's hard for them to do anything. But I think if one of either the Rams or the Seahawks were to fall out of that position, I think that the Packers would be the team to take over.
And it's crazy to think that I remember that whole off season of the draw with Aaron Rodgers. He's coming back. What's he doing? And he went on that like weekend with no power, no things. The guy was just doing the most for no reason. It's just like, do you want to play? Yes or no? Okay, well, we clearly don't want you, so go there. Like, he stretched that out so far. I think it went into like May or June before he finally made a decision. So it's pretty late. And I thought that when they did the draft that he would have made his decision then, but it was even after the draft. So you're screwing other teams. It's like, we could have got something back for you. Then he gets hurt in the very first game he plays. And now there's a lot of questions about what's he going to look like going forward. He's going to be like 40 years old when the next season starts.
Yeah.
And if you're the Jets, you got not Mike White, but you got who's
Wilson?
guy? Yeah. How much faith do you got in either of those guys getting you? I mean, you're not getting Rodgers. It's not like you have 20 years with the guy. You got 2.
Yeah.
That. So for the Jets, I don't know. I mean, if I were them, I would have rather just stuck with a young quarterback, develop him, and you knew this year was going to be tough because, especially in that division with the Falcons, not the Falcons, the Dolphins and the Bills, how it was like they were locked in to get the playoff spots. You knew it was going to be tough for the year, but I can't remember what they gave up to get Rodgers. But
I think they gave up a nice little chunk. I think it was 2 firsts.
Wow.
I think. I might be wrong. It might have been a first and a second, but I think it was 2 firsts.
And that's wild. If you got again, Rodgers did play great in his tenure with them, but when you're bringing on a 38, 39-year-old quarterback, unless you're the Browns and luck out with Joe Flacco, maybe that's what the Packers all wanted to do the whole time. Like, I guarantee we want to get a guy just like him on our team, and I didn't need it more.
Yeah.
But do you see a scenario where Rodgers plays next year, and do you think he'll be able to do you think he'll be the quarterback for the Jets that he was with the Packers?
I think he does play next year, and I think that it's Super Bowl or bust because he's either going to win him a Super Bowl, or if he doesn't, his career's over. I think he's got 1 year to show if he can do it, he can do it. If not, I think he's out of the league after next year. I think it's, like I said, I think it's either Super Bowl or he's done.
Yeah. There was no question. And I know like a lot of people are comparing him to like Joe Namath. I don't know if you ever saw any clips from him, but he was the guy that guaranteed the Jets would get their Super Bowl. This is like Super Bowl 3. So this is like 50 some odd years ago. And the only time they were ever victorious was in that Super Bowl. So a lot of people were like, oh man, we're going to get like the next Joe Namath coming here. He's going to guarantee a victory. We're going to get a Super Bowl. We're going to party all down Manhattan. And the first game of the season, he's done with an Achilles injury. So it's like, and I think I've asked this question before, but do you think it's harder for guys in their later part of their career to recover from injuries rather than guys who are like fresh out of like university and college?
100%. I thought when Rodgers went down, I didn't know if he'd play again. But then he starts, doing his typical Aaron Rodgers stuff, talking all this stuff about whatever he's doing to get himself right. And up until a month ago, I thought he could come back like this season. But with the way the Jets are playing, there's no point in him risking it. I think he takes the offseason to fully recover. I think he comes back strong. I just don't know how well that team will perform with him not being there for that long.
And that's the thing is, I mean, they have an okay team. They're not a great team around him, but imagine if he didn't get hurt. Imagine where the Jets would be. Like, I'm sure they would have more than 5 or 6 wins. I did just close my tablet, but I mean, just imagine the difference he could have made. Like they could have been snuck in as like a 7th seed and could have been damaged. So there's no question that he can lead to a team to greatness. I mean, he led to Green Bay to all those wins, but unfortunately only had one Super Bowl to show for it. So when he's healthy, he can do great. But again, if I was the GM of that team, I'd be a little skeptical because if he gets hurt next season, you just wasted all. You traded away your future picks that could have been great for your franchise.
Yep.
You signed a guy in his late to early 40s, and you're trusting him to lead you to a Super Bowl. But the thing with teams now is look at all the great teams in the league and how old are the quarterbacks. I don't think anyone's over the age of 30 that like Lamar Jackson's still in his 20s, like Holmes is still in his 20s, Josh Allen is still in his 20s. You look at the teams that they have young quarterbacks. There's a reason they have young quarterbacks because you need someone that can be younger. Yeah, exactly. So I don't know. Like if you're the Jets next season, like you said, it has to be Super Bowl or bust because if they don't make the playoffs or if he gets hurt, then you're screwing your future up even more. Like if you're in a rebuild, why bring on a veteran like that if you're not fully committed to saying, okay, we know we can win this division? The only way they can win a Super Bowl is if they get that division because I don't have that much faith in this Jets team going. I know there have been away teams that have won this Super and playoffs prior, but I don't have much faith that having a 41-year-old quarterback leading my team into Kansas City, leading my team into if you had to play a division round, just imagine how tough that would be. So for the Jets, they got their window is literally this. They don't succeed next year, you're going to be missing the playoffs probably for another decade, whatever it is. Like it's crazy. But what I was going to ask, I know we're already over an hour into this thing. This has been my longest stream, by the way, so I appreciate this. What I do want to ask is, would you have an interest in when the playoffs do come around and doing like some predictions?
Yeah, 100%.
Cool. I still make mine on my little channel and stuff like that. So, and don't worry, I did pick the Browns to win this week, so I'm not going to bet against them.
Thank you.
But if you had an interest in maybe doing something next week, and like if you want to do the last week of the season, we can feel free to do this. I just have to figure out a time. But for sure, when the playoffs kick around, I would love to start making some predictions and seeing how we do going forward.
100%. I'm pretty much free unless I'm at work. So you let me know and I'll probably be available.
Sounds good. I'll say this real quick. So up until week 16, my overall record for predictions and correct and incorrect, I'm 134-86. So I think I'll still finish above 500, which isn't too bad. Luckily, there haven't been any ties, and I haven't picked any ties either. So
I'll have to let you know. I'm in a pool with a couple of my buddies, just picking the winners every week. I'll have to let you know what my record is, but I think I'm doing pretty well over there.
That's good. That's good. Fantastic. Well, I do appreciate this, man. This has been awesome, and we'll be in touch. Yes. And if we can figure something out for a schedule-wise, like I said, to do some more of these, I would love nothing more than that.
Sounds good to me.
Awesome, bud. Thanks a lot for joining.
Yeah, thank you for having me on.
Right on. Well, hopefully enjoy the rest of your day and take care.
Yes, you as well.
See you, bud.
Bye.